"Eat that, old woman. It's good enough for you." The words hit me harder than the plastic container Marina slammed onto the kitchen tile. The lid popped open, spilling greasy noodles, wilted lettuce, and half-chewed chicken onto the floor. She kicked the mess closer to my chair, her lips curled into that cruel smile I had come to fear. My fork slipped from my hand. Daniel, my son, kept his eyes glued to his plate, chewing slowly, as if silence could shield him. And little Ethan, my 10-year-old grandson, froze in place with wide eyes, his small knuckles whitening around his spoon. That single moment shattered the last thread of dignity I had left. I stared at the pile of food smeared across the tile, the smell of soy sauce and sour cabbage mixing with the sharp sting of humiliation. My stomach turned, but not from hunger. I had been insulted before. Marina had called me useless, a burden, a relic taking up space. But never had she dared to throw scraps at me like I was a stray dog scratching at her back door. "Go on, Estelle. Don't waste good food," she said, folding her arms. "It's more than you deserve." Her voice echoed through the dining room, a space that had once been the heart of my home. I remembered the years when laughter filled these walls, when my late husband and I hosted Sunday suppers and neighbors brought pies and children played tag in the yard. Now the only sound was the tick of the wall clock and the squeak of Marina's sandal as she shifted her weight, waiting for me to kneel down and obey. I looked toward Daniel, praying for him to speak, to push back against this cruelty, to remind his wife that the roof over her head was mine. He didn't look up, not once. He just pushed a pea around his plate with the tip of his fork and muttered something about keeping the peace. My heart broke in silence. Ethan's spoon slipped from his hand. The clink of metal on porcelain made Marina snap her head toward him. He flinched and looked at me with tears already gathering in his big brown eyes. I wanted to reach across the table, to hold him, to tell him it wasn't his fault that his mother was poisoning this house with contempt. But Marina's shadow fell across us both. "What's wrong, Ethan?" she said, her tone as sharp as glass. "Scared of a little mess? Or scared that Grandma finally gets what she deserves?" The boy's lower lip trembled. He whispered something I couldn't hear, then ducked his head and stared at his lap. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I glanced at the clock on the wall. The hands pointed to 12:45. It was a Sunday afternoon, the day I had once cherished most. Sunday meant family, meant togetherness, meant the smell of roast chicken or fresh bread. Now it was nothing but a theater of humiliation, staged by the woman my son had chosen over me. The plastic container still lay on the floor, noodles drying into sticky strands, chicken skin congealing into lumps. Marina tapped her foot impatiently. "Well, are you going to eat it, or do you think you're too good for it?" The words seared through me. For a moment, I thought of bending down, of scooping the scraps into my hands just to keep the peace, just to stop the shame from stretching on. That's what I had done for years. Swallow my pride, bite my tongue, pretend it didn't matter. But something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage yet. It was something quieter, heavier, a stone forming in the pit of my stomach, steady and immovable. My eyes stayed on the mess at my feet, but my mind traveled farther back, to the little grocery store I had run for 20 years. I remembered stacking shelves at dawn, counting change late into the night, saving every dollar so Daniel could go to college. I remembered selling that store, the pride of my life, to help him buy this house after his marriage. Every brick around us, every chair we sat on, had been paid for by my sweat and my sacrifice. And now, I was the one being told to eat leftovers off the floor. I raised my head slowly. Marina's smirk faltered when she saw my face. Maybe she expected tears. Maybe she expected me to break like always. But I didn't cry. Not this time. "You want me to eat that?" I asked quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "Yes. Why not? It's perfectly fine for someone like you." I pushed my chair back. The scrape of the legs against the hardwood made Ethan jump. My hands trembled, but not from weakness, from something else, something I hadn't felt in years. I stood. The room seemed to shrink around me, the stale air heavy with silence. I bent down, not to touch the food, but to pick up the container. I held it carefully, then carried it to the trash can in the corner. Without a word, I dropped it inside. The clatter of plastic against metal rang out like a warning bell. When I turned back, Marina's mouth hung open. Daniel finally looked up, his fork frozen halfway to his lips. I took a deep breath. My voice was calm, but my heart pounded so hard it felt like the walls might hear it. "I will never eat scraps off the floor," I said. "Not in my own house, not ever." The silence that followed was sharper than any insult Marina had ever hurled. Ethan's eyes widened with something I hadn't seen in years. Hope. And in that moment, I realized the storm inside me had only begun to rise. After I dropped that container into the trash, I went back to my room and closed the door behind me. My hands were still shaking, not from fear, but from a rush of something I could not name. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at the quilt folded at the foot. It was the same quilt I had stitched with Daniel's initials when he was a baby. The fabric was worn thin now, but the memories clung to it. For a long moment, I let myself fall backward, my eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling, and all the years that had led me here began to unspool in my mind. I was 29 when my husband died. A car accident on a rainy night took him away in a blink, leaving me with a small boy and a mountain of bills. I kept the grocery store running because I had no choice. Every morning at 6, I opened the doors and turned on the lights. I stocked the shelves, ordered bread, and learned to smile at customers even when my chest ached with grief. The store became my lifeline, the place where I proved to myself that I could keep going when the world had said I could not. Daniel was everything to me. I made sure he had clean clothes, a packed lunch, and tuition when the time came. I never let him see me cry at the kitchen table when the numbers in my checkbook did not add up. I would just wipe my face, turn the page, and find another way to stretch $1. By the time he left for college, I had built a routine that revolved entirely around his future. The store was sold 10 years later. It hurt to let go, but Daniel and Marina had just married and they wanted to start fresh. They said this house was their dream. I handed over the check from the sale without hesitation. It was enough for the down payment, plus a cushion for furniture and repairs. I told myself it was the right thing to do. A mother invests in her child. That is what I had always believed. At first, Marina was polite, almost sweet. She would thank me for cooking, ask me to watch Ethan when he was a baby, and smile at neighbors in a way that made everyone think she was the perfect daughter-in-law. But little cracks showed. She started deciding what groceries were bought. She took the largest bedroom while I moved into the small one at the back. I told myself it did not matter. As long as Daniel was happy, I could adjust. But the adjustments kept coming. I was told not to invite friends over because it might disturb the baby. I was asked to eat dinner later so Marina and Daniel could have private time. Eventually, I stopped questioning and simply adapted, convincing myself that peace was worth more than pride. Then came the small humiliations that never left bruises but cut just as deep. She would hand me her laundry without a word, as if it were my duty. She would correct me in front of Ethan, saying, "Grandma's old-fashioned ways," as if my love was outdated. Each time, Daniel kept quiet. He told me in hushed tones that it was better not to argue, that I should let things slide for the sake of the family. I did. For years I did. But memories of my sacrifices haunted me. I remembered Christmas mornings when I stayed up all night, wrapping gifts I could barely afford, only to see Daniel's eyes light up. I remembered saving coins in a jar labeled college fund, even when my own shoes had holes. I remembered cutting out recipes from magazines so I could make dinners that felt special, even when meat was scarce. All of that had built his life. All of that had laid the foundation for this house. And yet here I was, living as if I were a guest who had overstayed her welcome. As I sat on the bed, I thought of my husband again. He had been a quiet man, but strong in his own way. He would never have tolerated disrespect in his home. I tried to imagine what he would say if he saw me now, cowering under the roof we had dreamed of together. The thought burned. I pressed my palms flat against the quilt, grounding myself. I realized that the years of sacrifice had not only built a life for Daniel, they had built a strength in me that I had forgotten was there. I had endured storms before. I had survived with less than nothing. I had faced the world as a widow and still managed to raise a son. And now, I was being told to eat leftovers off the floor. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. The memories were no longer just a source of pain. They were fuel. Every long night at the store, every penny saved, every insult swallowed, all of it added up to something. It added up to the certainty that I was not finished yet. I opened my eyes and looked at the small dresser across the room. Inside were documents I had kept neatly folded for years. Proof of the land still in my name, proof of the sweat I had poured into building something that was mine. They had forgotten, but I had not. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to clarity. The past had not been wasted. It was pointing me toward what needed to be done next. The clock in the hallway struck 1, each chime deep and steady. I rose from the bed and straightened my shoulders. The years of sacrifice were not just stories to cry over. They were the reason I still had fight left in me. That night, I lay awake long after the house had gone quiet. The ticking of the wall clock in the hallway was the only sound, steady and merciless. I could hear Daniel's soft snoring from the other side of the thin wall, and the occasional creak of the floorboards as the house settled. I wanted to close my eyes and forget, but something in me kept listening. That was when I caught it. A murmur of voices drifted down the hall. I held my breath. Marina's tone was sharp, almost a hiss, and Daniel's voice was lower, wavering. I slid out of bed and pressed my ear to the door. The words weren't clear at first, but when Marina raised her voice, I heard enough to make my stomach turn. She can't stay here much longer. It's time we face it. That land is wasted in her name. We could sell it for almost $500,000 and finally breathe. Daniel mumbled something I couldn't catch. You think she'll just hand it over? She won't. We need to be smart. Those places cost around $1,600 a month, but with the money from the land, we'll have no problem. You want Ethan to grow up in a decent home, don't you? Not in this cramped mess with your mother walking around like a ghost? My breath caught in my throat. I gripped the doorframe until my nails dug into the wood. They were talking about my land, the 15 acres outside town that my husband and I had bought long ago as an investment, the one thing I had never surrendered. I had paid the taxes faithfully every year, even when money was tight, and now it had become their target. Daniel spoke louder this time. But what if she refuses? She's still sharp enough to say no. Marina laughed. The sound was like glass breaking. We'll make her look unstable. It's not hard. Everyone already sees her as forgetful. You've seen the way she repeats herself. A little push, a little story here and there, and no one will question us. Once she's in a nursing home, we'll have power of attorney. The land will be ours to sell. I stepped back from the door, my legs weak. The betrayal burned through me, hotter than any insult Marina had ever spat in my face. My own son, the boy I had raised with every ounce of strength I had, was letting his wife scheme against me. Their voices went on. Daniel sighed heavily. I don't want her to hate me. She already resents you, Marina snapped. She thinks you're still her little boy. You're 40 now. Start acting like it. This is our life, Daniel. Either we take control or we stay stuck forever. You choose. Silence followed. I imagined him nodding, letting her words sink into his bones the way poison spreads through water. I crept back to my bed and sat down hard. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would wake the whole house. They were planning to lock me away, strip me of the only thing I truly owned, and pretend it was for my own good. I stared at the dresser, where my documents lay hidden. The deed to the land, the tax receipts, all of it was in order. They could plot all they wanted, but they had no legal right to touch it. Still, the thought that they were willing to paint me as unstable twisted something inside me. Memories flooded back, not the kind I wanted, but the ones that cut deepest. The day Daniel was born, when I held him and swore I would protect him no matter what. The nights I stayed up sewing costumes for his school plays because we couldn't afford store-bought ones. The hours I spent at the hospital when he broke his arm, falling off his bike. All of that love, all of that sacrifice, and now he was willing to let his wife declare me senile so she could cash in on my land. I wanted to scream, but instead I sat there in silence, my fists clenched in my lap. 1,000 thoughts raced through me, but one kept rising above the rest. If they thought I was too weak to fight back, they had forgotten who I was. The house grew quiet again, their voices fading into sleep. I could not sleep. I sat upright until the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, turning the walls a pale gray. My body was exhausted, but my mind had never been clearer. By breakfast, Marina acted as if nothing had happened. She hummed while she poured coffee, set toast on the table, and chatted about the price of groceries. Daniel kept his head down, his spoon clinking against his bowl of cereal. Neither of them looked at me. They didn't have to. I already knew what was hiding behind their silence. Ethan came in rubbing his eyes, still half asleep. He climbed onto his chair and asked for jam. I spread it on his toast while Marina watched me with thinly veiled impatience. To anyone else, it might have looked like a normal family morning, but I knew better. I knew that under the calm surface, they had already written me out of their future. I caught Daniel's gaze once. For a flicker of a second, I saw something like guilt. He looked away quickly, sipping his coffee. Marina noticed, narrowing her eyes at him before turning her attention back to me. "Estelle, you should think about what's best for everyone," she said casually, as if we hadn't had the night's conversation. "Sometimes that means making hard choices. You're not as young as you used to be. Wouldn't it be nice to rest and let others take care of things?" Her words were coated in sugar, but I heard the venom underneath. I forced a smile, small and steady. "I'll think about it." And I would. But not in the way she expected. Inside, I was already planning. The week that followed felt like walking across thin ice. Every step I took around that house seemed to creak under Marina's watchful eyes. She had shifted from open hostility to a subtler kind of cruelty, one that wore a smile but carried a knife beneath it. It was the kind of game she enjoyed, twisting ordinary moments into small humiliations designed to remind me of my place. One morning, I came into the kitchen to make tea. The kettle was gone from its usual spot. I searched the cabinets, the counter, even the pantry, but it wasn't there. Marina walked in just as I was standing at the sink, confused. She carried her travel mug, steam rising from the lid. "Looking for something?" she asked, her tone light, almost playful. "The kettle," I said. "Oh, I put it in the garage. We need more space in here, and you don't really need it. I'll make tea for you when I have time." She brushed past me to grab her purse, leaving the faint smell of perfume in her wake. I stood frozen, the message clear. Even boiling water had become a privilege, something she could give or withhold as she pleased. Another evening, she came home with 2 grocery bags. She unpacked steaks, wine, and fresh vegetables, setting them neatly on the counter. I noticed there was no bread, no milk, none of the basics I usually bought for Ethan and myself. "Where are the eggs?" I asked softly. Marina turned, her smile sharp. "We're on a budget, Estelle. We can't afford everything. Besides, you don't eat much. A piece of toast here and there is enough for you, isn't it?" Daniel sat at the table, flipping through the mail, pretending not to hear. His silence was the loudest part of the room. But the worst came on Saturday, when a few neighbors stopped by. They were friendly women I had known for years, the kind who remembered when Daniel was little and still playing catch in the yard. They brought cookies for Ethan and chatted in the living room while he showed them his drawings. I sat on the couch, quietly enjoying the sound of laughter that had been missing from the house for too long. Marina appeared in the doorway, her smile tight as a string. "Could I see you for a moment, Estelle?" I followed her into the kitchen. She closed the door behind us and lowered her voice. "You should excuse yourself. It's confusing for people when you linger. They don't know if you live here or if you're just visiting. Best to let Daniel and me handle it." My throat went dry. "This is my home," I said, barely louder than a whisper. She tilted her head. "It was. Times change. Now you're more of a guest, and guests should know when to step aside." When I didn't move right away, she opened the door and called into the living room, her voice sweet and cheerful. "Estelle isn't feeling well today. She'll rest in her room while we catch up." The women looked surprised, but they nodded politely. I forced a smile as I walked past them, each step heavier than the last. In my room, I closed the door and pressed my back against it, shame flooding through me. Later that evening, I overheard one of the neighbors in the driveway as they were leaving. "It's such a shame. She used to be so strong. Now she seems frail." Their voices carried through the thin walls, and I knew Marina had planted the seed. She was building the image she needed, piece by piece, shaping me into the unstable old woman she could justify sending away. The humiliation didn't stop there. At dinner that night, Marina served Daniel and Ethan full plates of steak and vegetables. She placed a small plate in front of me with scraps of fat and 2 limp carrots. I looked at Daniel. He swallowed hard but said nothing. Ethan frowned. "Why doesn't Grandma get more?" Marina's smile never faltered. "Because she doesn't need much, sweetheart. Too much food isn't good for someone her age." Ethan pushed his plate toward me, whispering, "You can have some of mine." Marina snapped. "Eat your dinner, Ethan. Don't argue with adults." The boy's cheeks flushed red. He picked up his fork and lowered his head, but not before glancing at me with eyes that carried both love and helplessness. That night, I sat at my dresser, staring at my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked older than her years, her shoulders stooped, her eyes tired. Marina's voice echoed in my head, every insult, every calculated move. She was stripping me down layer by layer, not just of comforts, but of dignity. Still, beneath the exhaustion, I saw something else in that reflection, a flicker of defiance. The same fire that had kept me running the store after my husband's death. The same determination that had carried me through every hard season. Marina wanted me to be invisible. She wanted me to vanish quietly so she could take everything I had worked for. But I was not gone yet. The next morning, when Marina found me sweeping the porch, she smirked. "Careful, Estelle. People will think you're trying too hard. Best not to draw attention." I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. Let them think what they want. For the first time, her smile faltered. Inside, my humiliation was still raw, but now it was turning into something else. Something stronger. That night, the weight of everything pressed down on me so hard I could barely breathe. I sat in my room with the lights off, the curtains drawn, and only the glow of the street lamp slipping through the window. My chest ached with the sting of every insult, every small cruelty Marina had sharpened against me. My head replayed her voice over and over. Frail, guest, a burden. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it didn't stop. I pulled my old journal out of the nightstand drawer. Its cover was cracked, the pages yellowed, but it had always been a place where I could be honest. I wrote with a heavy hand, the pen digging grooves into the paper. The words spilled out faster than I could shape them. I wrote about the food on the floor, about Daniel's silence, about the look in Ethan's eyes when he tried to share his dinner with me. I wrote until the page was wet with tears. When I set the pen down, I stared at what I had written. For years I had convinced myself that swallowing pain was the same as keeping peace. But what peace was there now? This house felt like a prison where I lived under the command of a woman who wanted me erased. My sacrifices had become invisible. My love had been twisted into weakness. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and stood. My knees ached, my back protested, but I moved to the dresser where the documents lay hidden. I pulled them out one by one. The deed to the land, the tax receipts. Proof that it was mine, not Marina's, not Daniel's, mine. I spread them across the bed, smoothing the edges with trembling fingers. Looking at them reminded me that I still had a foundation, something solid, no matter what lies they told. I whispered to the empty room, "You will not take this from me." For the first time in years, I felt my voice settle deep in my chest, steady and certain. It wasn't loud, but it was firm. I sat down again and thought about the years behind me. I had survived worse storms. I had buried a husband, run a store alone, raised a boy without help. I had faced loneliness, debt, exhaustion, and still I had stood. Marina thought she could break me with scraps of food and cruel smiles, but she did not know who I was. The clock struck midnight. I listened to its rhythm, each chime like a marker of the life I still owned. In the silence that followed, I made a decision. I would stop bending. I would stop waiting for Daniel to grow a backbone he clearly didn't have. If Marina wanted a war, she would get one, but it would not be the war she expected. I put the documents back into the drawer, this time locking it with the tiny brass key I had never used before. I placed the key in my pocket, close to me, as if it were a secret heartbeat. Then I sat back on the bed and took a long breath. Images ran through my mind. Marina smirking as she told neighbors I was frail. Daniel staring into his coffee while she carved up my life with her words. Ethan, shrinking smaller each time his mother's voice rose. These images hurt, but they also hardened me. Every insult had been a nail in the coffin she was building for me. Now those nails would become weapons in my hands. I pressed my palms together and closed my eyes. "Lord, give me the strength to hold my ground," I whispered. My voice cracked, but I meant every word. I remembered the first time I stood up to a customer at the store who had accused me of shortchanging him. My hands had shaken, but I had held steady, counted the coins out loud, and proved him wrong. That same fire was still there. It had only been buried under years of silence. I opened my eyes and looked at the small mirror on the dresser. My reflection stared back at me, tired but alive. The lines on my face told the story of every year I had fought and endured. Tonight those lines did not make me look weak. They made me look seasoned, like a tree that had weathered storms and was still standing. I rose and paced the small room, my bare feet whispering against the rug. My thoughts sharpened into plans. If they wanted to make me look unstable, I would show them stability they could not shake. If they wanted to paint me as frail, I would show them strength in every step I took. If they thought they could strip me of dignity, I would wear it like armor. The anger inside me was no longer wild. It was controlled, focused. It pulsed through me like a slow drumbeat, steady and unyielding. I stopped at the window and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, the yard was washed in silver light from the moon. The land stretched far beyond the house, the same land Marina wanted to claim. I whispered into the night. "It's mine. It always will be." The curtain fell back into place. I lay down on the bed, the documents locked away, the journal closed at my side. For the first time in weeks, I closed my eyes not with despair, but with a sense of resolve. Tomorrow would come, and with it more insults, more silence, more of Marina's games. But tomorrow would also come with me, standing firmer than before, and that was something she had never counted on. The next morning I woke with a weight in my chest, but it was not despair this time, it was resolve. The quiet strength I had felt the night before had not vanished in sleep. If anything, it had sharpened. I knew I could not fight Marina and Daniel's schemes alone. I needed someone on my side, someone who remembered me not as the frail woman Marina painted, but as the capable woman I had always been. I thought of Harold. He had been my neighbor for years before he retired and moved across town. A careful man with numbers, a steady presence at church, and a friend I trusted. I had not spoken to him in months, but when I reached for the phone, my hands moved without hesitation. The line rang twice before his familiar voice answered. "Hello? Harold, it's Estelle." There was a pause, then warmth filled his tone. "Well, I'll be. It's been too long. How are you?" I swallowed, unsure how much to reveal, but the truth pressed out of me. I could use some advice. "Do you have time to meet?" "Of course. Coffee at the diner on Main Street? Say 11? I agreed, and for the first time in weeks, I felt anticipation instead of dread. By the time I walked into the diner, Harold was already in a booth by the window. His white hair was neatly combed, his shirt tucked in crisp as always. When he saw me, he stood and gave me a smile that reached his eyes. "Estelle, you look tired, but strong," he said gently. I slid into the booth across from him, grateful for the kindness in his voice. We ordered coffee, and as soon as the waitress left, I began to speak. I told him everything. The leftovers on the floor, the humiliation at the table, the whispers about sending me to a nursing home, the talk of selling my land. My words tumbled out faster than I planned, but Harold listened without interruption, only nodding now and then, his eyes steady on mine. When I finished, my throat was dry, and my hands trembled around the coffee cup. He leaned forward slightly. "You still have the deed, don't you?" "Yes. I keep it locked away with the tax receipts." "Good. That land is yours, legally and completely. They can pressure you, they can lie about you, but they can't take what's not in their name, not without your consent." I let out a shaky breath. But what if they make me look unstable? What if they find a way to twist things? Harold's jaw tightened. "Then you keep records. Write everything down. Dates, times, what was said. If they try to discredit you, you'll have proof of their behavior. And if it comes to it, you'll have me as a witness. People still trust me around here." Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back. "You would do that for me?" "In a heartbeat. You've stood alone long enough." The waitress returned with our plates, and we paused while she set them down. As we ate, Harold asked questions about my finances. I told him about my small pension, how it had been drained for years into the household bills without so much as a thank you. His frown deepened. "You need to move that money into a separate account," he said. "One only you control. If they've been treating your pension like their allowance, cutting it off will remind them who's really keeping the lights on." I nodded slowly. The thought of taking action filled me with a quiet thrill, though fear lurked beneath it. Marina would not take kindly to losing control. Harold must have seen the hesitation in my face. He leaned back and folded his hands. "Estelle, you've been fighting storms all your life. You can do this. It's not about revenge. It's about survival, about dignity. Don't let them write the end of your story while you're still living it." His words settled deep in me, like stones building a foundation. I realized then how starved I had been for someone to believe in me. After we finished eating, Harold insisted on driving me to the bank. I sat across the desk from a young banker while Harold waited in the lobby. I signed the papers to open a new account. My pension redirected away from the household account Marina had treated like her personal wallet. When the banker handed me the folder with my new account information, I felt a surge of power, small but real. Walking back to the car, Harold glanced at me. "Feels different, doesn't it?" "It feels like breathing again," I admitted. He smiled. "That's only the first step. Keep those papers safe. Keep your head clear. You have more strength than you think." He dropped me off at the corner near the house so Marina wouldn't see his car. Before I got out, he touched my arm. "Call me if things get worse. Don't wait." I promised I would, then watched as he drove away. When I stepped inside the house, the air felt heavier, but I carried something new with me. Marina was in the kitchen, her back turned as she chopped vegetables. Daniel sat at the table, staring at his phone. Neither of them looked up when I entered, and I slipped quietly to my room. I opened the drawer and placed the folder beside the deed and tax receipts. My little arsenal was growing. The humiliation still burned, the insults still stung, but now they were no longer the end of the story. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought of Harold's words. "Don't let them write the end of your story." I repeated it until sleep finally claimed me. The days after my meeting with Harold moved differently. I no longer floated through them like a shadow. I walked with purpose, even if I kept my steps quiet. Marina still found ways to belittle me, but her words no longer cut the same way. Each insult slid against a shield she didn't know I had built. I began to prepare in silence. My first step had been the bank account. The second was gathering everything that proved who I was and what belonged to me. At night, when Marina and Daniel were asleep, I spread the documents across my bed. The deed to the land, the tax records, the bank statements. I organized them into folders, labeling each one. If they wanted to call me unstable, I would drown them in proof of my clarity. One afternoon, while Marina was out, I made a call I had been putting off. I dialed the number on a card Harold had slipped into my hand before he left me at the corner. "Antonio Ruiz, attorney at law," the voice on the other end answered. "This is Estelle Miller," I said, my voice steady. "I was given your number by Harold Bennett. I need to discuss protecting my assets." He arranged an appointment for the following morning. When I arrived at his office, I clutched my folders to my chest like armor. Antonio was a calm man with silver hair and patient eyes. He listened as I told him everything, from the scraps on the floor to the late-night conversation I had overheard. I laid the documents on his desk one by one. He studied them carefully, nodding. "Your position is strong. The land is entirely yours. If anyone tries to force you into a nursing facility for financial gain, it would be considered exploitation. The law is on your side." Relief washed over me, though fear still lingered. "But they will try. They're already planning." "Then you document everything," he said firmly. "Keep a record of incidents, keep your financial control separate, and do not sign anything without me reviewing it first. If they pressure you, call me immediately. We can also prepare a statement of intent declaring your full competence and ownership rights." I signed the papers he drafted, my hand shaking only slightly. As I left his office, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was defending myself. That evening, Marina cornered me in the hallway. "Where were you today?" I met her eyes. Out. Her brows lifted, suspicion flickering across her face. "You didn't say anything." "I don't need to report to you," I answered, my tone even. Her mouth tightened, but she said nothing more. She didn't know it, but the balance had begun to shift. The next day brought a letter that nearly stopped my heart. It was from a law office in another town, addressed to me in my sister Rachel's name. I hadn't seen her in over a decade, not since a bitter fight had left us both too proud to reconcile. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from her lawyer and a smaller envelope marked for Estelle. Rachel had passed away 6 months earlier. She had left me something. With trembling fingers, I opened the smaller envelope. Inside was her handwritten note, shaky but clear. She wrote of regret, of years wasted on silence, of love that had never truly died. She apologized for letting pride keep us apart and wrote that she hoped I would forgive her. She ended with words that blurred as tears filled my eyes. I leave you my 2 condos downtown, paid in full, and the savings I managed to set aside. Use them to live, Estelle. Really live. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter pressed to my chest. Marina's voice carried from the living room where she watched television, but it felt distant, almost unreal. Rachel had given me a gift that shattered every chain Marina thought she had locked around me. The following week, I met with Antonio again. He confirmed the inheritance, explained the paperwork, and assured me that it was all legally binding. You now have substantial assets, he said, sliding the documents toward me. This changes everything. It did. With the condos and the savings Rachel had left, I was no longer cornered. I had options. I had independence. That night, I lay awake, not with dread, but with cautious hope. For the first time, I imagined a future where Marina's voice no longer filled the house, where Daniel's silence no longer smothered me, where Ethan could laugh freely without fear of being scolded. I imagined walking into my own place, closing the door, and knowing that no one could order me out. I pressed Rachel's letter against my chest once more. Thank you, I whispered into the dark. In the silence of that night, I made another promise to myself. I would not just defend what was mine, I would take back my life. Marina and Daniel had underestimated me for too long. They thought they could erase me. They thought I was too tired to resist. They were about to learn that I had only just begun. The first change came quietly, like the flick of a switch no one else could see. My pension check arrived as usual, but this time, it went straight into my new account. I sat at the kitchen table early that morning, sipping tea I had managed to make with the small kettle I bought in secret, and watched Marina shuffle through the mail. She looked for the envelope like she always did, her fingers moving quickly, her lips pressing tight when it wasn't there. Anything important? Daniel asked without looking up from his coffee. Nothing but bills, Marina said flatly, tossing the stack onto the counter. Her eyes lingered on me, sharp and suspicious, but I kept my face calm. That evening, the tension broke through. Marina pulled Daniel into the living room while I was washing dishes. Their voices carried down the hall. The check isn't there, she hissed. It's the first of the month. Where's the money? Maybe the mail is delayed, Daniel muttered. It's not delayed. She's hiding it. She's hiding money from us. I dried my hands and stepped into the doorway. It's my pension, not yours, not his, mine. The room went silent. Daniel's eyes dropped to the carpet. Marina's face flushed red. You selfish old woman, she snapped. You think you can just cut us off? We've been paying the bills, keeping this place running, and you're going to hoard money like some miser? I felt my voice steady, low but clear. I've been paying those bills for years. You've been spending what isn't yours. That ends now. Marina took a step closer, her finger jabbing the air between us. You'll regret this. You think you can survive without us? You think Ethan will still look at you the same when you're out on the street? Ethan knows who I am, I said softly. And so do you. That's what scares you. Daniel raised his hands as if to calm us. Please, let's just sit down. We can figure something out. But Marina wasn't interested in figuring anything out. She stormed out of the room, muttering under her breath. Daniel followed her, leaving me standing alone. The next week was a storm of small battles. The grocery money ran thin without my check, padding their expenses. Marina snapped at Daniel over everything, from the lights being left on to the price of gasoline. I heard them argue late at night, her voice sharp, his voice tired. I knew my absence in their finances was pulling them apart. One afternoon, I came home from a short walk to find Marina rifling through my dresser drawers. She jumped when she saw me in the doorway, but she didn't bother to look guilty. What are you hiding? She demanded. I walked past her, calmly closing the drawer she had left open. What I keep is mine. You don't have the right to touch it. Her jaw clenched. If you think you can play games with me, you're wrong. I'll find out everything. I always do. I looked her in the eye. You've already lost. For the first time, her confidence cracked. She blinked, searching my face for weakness, and found none. She shoved past me and slammed the door behind her. Later that night, Daniel knocked softly on my door. He stepped inside, his shoulders slumped. Mom, he said quietly, maybe you should just give Marina part of the pension. She's stressed. We're behind on bills. It would make things easier. I shook my head. I've given enough. Too much. If she wants to live comfortably, she can earn it. I won't be their purse anymore. his eyes filled with something between shame and defeat. He nodded slowly and left without another word. Days passed, and the house grew tense. Marina's smile grew sharper around neighbors, but inside these walls, her mask slipped. She slammed doors, left dishes for me to clean, and made pointed comments about how some people were ungrateful. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't undo what I had done. The money was gone from her reach, and with it went the power she had wielded over me for so long. One evening, Ethan slipped into my room, his eyes wide. He carried a crumpled dollar bill in his small hand. "Grandma, you can have this," he whispered, "in case Mom won't give you money." I pulled him into my arms, my throat tight. "No, sweetheart, you keep it. Grandma has everything she needs now." He looked up at me, doubt flickering in his eyes, but I smiled until he believed me. When he left, I sat on the edge of my bed and let the silence settle around me. The first strike had landed. Marina had counted on my money to keep her world spinning, and now that I had taken it back, the cracks were widening. It wasn't revenge yet, not in the way she would understand. It was simply a reminder that I wasn't gone, that I wasn't powerless. A reminder that the woman she tried to reduce to scraps on the floor still had strength she could not take. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. The first week without my pension money inside their grasp left the house restless. Marina paced the kitchen every morning, banging drawers and slamming the refrigerator door, as if the noise itself would shake coins loose. Daniel sat longer at the table, staring at his coffee as if it held answers. I went about my routine quietly, sweeping the porch, folding laundry, and tending to Ethan when I could. I no longer shrank into the background. I held my head higher, and that alone seemed to drive Marina into deeper rage. One night, the tension boiled over. I had just finished setting Ethan's school clothes on the chair by his bed when Marina barged into my room without knocking. Her eyes were sharp, her jaw tight. "Where is it?" she demanded. I stayed seated on the edge of the bed. "Where is what?" "Don't play games with me. The money, your pension, the bank statements, all of it." "My money is not yours to demand," I said calmly. She took a step closer, her finger pointing toward my dresser. "You think hiding behind papers and secrets will protect you? You're old, you're forgetful. It won't take much to show everyone you're slipping. Once that happens, the law will hand everything over to Daniel. Then we'll see who controls what." I rose slowly, my knees stiff, but my voice steady. "You underestimate me, Marina, and you overestimate your own power." Her face twisted with fury. She leaned closer, her whisper hot and venomous. "You've ruined this family. Daniel doesn't say it out loud, but he knows you're in the way. Ethan sees you as a weakness. We would be better off without you." The words stabbed at me, sharp and cold. But instead of crumbling, I let silence fill the space. My lack of reaction seemed to unnerve her more than any outburst could. She turned on her heel and stormed out, the door rattling in its frame behind her. The next morning, Daniel approached me in the kitchen. He kept his voice low, glancing around as if Marina might appear from the walls. "Mom, can't you compromise? She's under a lot of stress. Maybe if you gave her access to part of the money, she'd calm down." I stirred my tea slowly, letting the steam rise. "Compromise is what I've been doing for 10 years. That's over now." He rubbed his forehead. "You're forcing her hand. I can't stop her if she decides to." He trailed off. I looked him in the eye. "If she decides to do what, Daniel? To lock me away? To sell what isn't hers? You have a choice too. You can stand with your mother or let her drag you down with her greed." He had no answer. He left the room quietly, his shoulders hunched. The cracks grew wider each day. Bills piled on the counter, unopened. Marina complained loudly about sacrifices she had to make, cutting cable, cooking cheaper meals, blaming me for every missing comfort. Ethan heard it all. I watched the confusion in his eyes as he tried to make sense of the bitterness spilling out of his mother. He clung to me more, sitting at my side while I read, asking me to walk him to school. Marina noticed and resented it, her comments sharp whenever she saw him near me. "Don't bother Grandma, Ethan," she said one evening. "She has enough on her plate, if you can call it that." He frowned and pressed closer to my arm. I wrapped it around him, silent but firm. By the end of that week, Marina's rage no longer hid behind closed doors. At dinner, she slammed her fork against the plate and glared at me. "This can't go on. You're tearing this house apart. Do you understand that?" I looked at her steadily. The house was already falling apart. You just don't like that I'm no longer cleaning up the pieces for you. Daniel's hand trembled as he set down his glass. Stop, he pleaded, looking between us. Just stop. We're supposed to be a family. A family doesn't threaten to lock their mother away, I said quietly. Marina let out a bitter laugh. Listen to her, Daniel. She's delusional, twisting everything to make herself the victim. Do you see now why she can't stay here? She's dangerous to us, to you, to Ethan. Ethan's fork clattered to the table. Grandma's not dangerous, he whispered. His voice was small but clear. She's the only one who helps me with my homework. She makes me feel safe. The room fell silent. Marina's face paled, then flushed bright red. She pushed her chair back so hard, it screeched across the floor and stormed out of the dining room. Daniel sat frozen, torn between his son's truth and his wife's fury. I reached over and touched Ethan's hand. Eat your dinner, sweetheart, I said softly. It's all right. But inside, I knew it was not all right. Marina's rage had reached a point where words were no longer enough for her. She wanted control, and she would not stop until she felt she had it. Later that night, I heard her shouting at Daniel through the thin walls. If she won't give us the money, then she has to go. I don't care how. Find a way. I won't live like this another month. Daniel's response was muffled, hesitant, but he did not argue with her. I sat on my bed in the dark, clutching Rachel's letter to my chest. The fury rising in Marina was dangerous, but it also confirmed what I already knew. I had struck the right nerve. My first move had weakened her, and now she was unraveling. Still, the weight of her threat pressed heavy on me. I understood now that this was not just about dignity or respect. It was about survival. If I let her keep pushing unchecked, she would find a way to shove me aside, no matter what it took. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the drawer with the documents and account information. My arsenal was ready. My ally and herald was steady. My lawyer had given me tools. But what fueled me most was not paper or signatures. It was the image of Ethan's small face across the dinner table, his voice shaking but brave as he defended me. I whispered to myself in the dark, I will not let her win. The house outside my door creaked and sighed, but I no longer felt afraid of its shadows. The storm had arrived, and I was ready to meet it. The breaking point came on a gray Thursday morning. Marina was already in the kitchen when I walked in, her voice sharp as she slammed bills onto the table in front of Daniel. We're drowning, she snapped. And it's because of her. She jerked her head toward me. She's sitting on money while we can't even keep up with the power bill. Daniel rubbed his temples. Marina, please. Not now. Not now? She shot back. When then? When the lights go out? When Ethan's teachers start calling about unpaid tuition fees? This is insane, Daniel. You need to put your foot down. I set my teacup on the counter and looked at them both. This house is mine. The land is mine. My pension is mine. What's insane is pretending otherwise. Marina's laugh was bitter. Listen to her. She sounds like a queen ruling her castle. You're delusional, Estelle. Everyone sees it. Everyone knows you're not capable of managing things anymore. It's only a matter of time before someone else takes control. She didn't know I had been preparing for this exact moment. I walked back to my room, opened the drawer, and pulled out the small recorder Harold had encouraged me to buy. My hand was steady as I returned to the kitchen. You want to talk about control? I said, pressing the play button. Marina's voice filled the room, recorded from that night I had stood in the hallway. We'll make her look unstable. It's not hard. Everyone already sees her as forgetful. Once she's in a nursing home, we'll have power of attorney. The land will be ours to sell. Daniel's head shot up, his eyes wide. Marina's face drained of color. Where did you get that? She demanded. I heard you, I said evenly. And now it's recorded. This isn't just family conflict anymore. This is evidence. Daniel's voice cracked. Marina, tell me that's not you. But the words were unmistakably hers. She stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Then, in a desperate tone, she said, It was just talk. I didn't mean it. You meant every word, I replied. And now there's proof. I pulled another folder from my bag and placed it on the table. These are documents from my lawyer, Antonio Ruiz. They confirm the land belongs solely to me. They confirm my accounts are secure. And they confirm that any attempt to coerce me into signing over rights would be considered exploitation. Do you know what happens when someone exploits an elder for financial gain? People go to prison. Marina's lips trembled, but anger flared in her eyes. You think a lawyer scares me? You think a piece of paper changes anything? It changes everything, I said. Daniel picked up one of the documents, his hands shaking as he read. His face grew pale. She's right, Marina. This is legal. We can't fight this. You spineless fool, Marina hissed. You'd rather side with her than protect your own family? Daniel's voice broke. She is my family. You've turned me against my own mother, and now... He trailed off, tears glistening in his eyes. I stepped closer, my voice low but unshakable. I will no longer be silent in my own home. You have 30 days to leave this house. The law requires it. The papers are ready. I've already contacted an agent to begin the process of selling. Marina's scream was raw. You can't do this. Where will we go? What about Ethan? You'll rip him away from me? Ethan will always be welcome in my life, I said, my voice softening as I thought of the boy's kind eyes. But you? You forfeited your place when you spat on me with every word, every action, every scheme. Daniel buried his face in his hands. God, what have we done? Marina turned on him, furious. Don't you dare cry now. You were part of this. You let her walk all over us for years. You think she'll forgive you just because she's throwing you scraps of pity? Her words stung him visibly, but he said nothing. He sat frozen, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I placed the recorder and the documents back into my bag. This conversation is finished. I will not discuss it again. 30 days, that's all you have. Marina lunged forward, her hand gripping the edge of the table. I'll ruin you, she hissed. I'll tell everyone you're cruel, that you abandoned your own family. Tell them, I said calmly. The evidence will speak louder than your lies. The silence that followed was thick. Even the ticking of the clock seemed muted. Marina's breathing was ragged, her face twisted with rage, but she could not speak another word. Daniel's quiet sobs filled the room instead, the sound of a man who realized too late the cost of his silence. I turned and walked to the doorway. Ethan stood there, clutching his school bag, his eyes wide. He had heard more than I wanted him to, but I did not look away. I knelt down and touched his shoulder. Go get ready, sweetheart, I whispered. We'll be fine. He nodded slowly, his small hand gripping mine for a moment before he slipped past us and into his room. I stood again and faced Marina one last time. This house will not be your cage for me any longer. The walls are mine, the land is mine, and soon you will be gone. I left the kitchen, my steps steady, my breath slow. Behind me, the house crackled with tension, but inside me, something unshakable had taken root. The war was no longer hidden in whispers and insults. It was out in the open now, with proof and power on my side. The fight for my dignity had become a battle for justice, and for the first time in years, I knew I would win. The days after the confrontation were heavy with silence. Marina moved around the house like a storm contained in human form, her steps hard on the floor, her voice sharp even when she spoke about ordinary things. Daniel kept his head low, avoiding both of us, as if shrinking into invisibility could undo what had been said. Ethan clung to me more than ever, sensing the tension but too young to understand its full weight. I carried myself differently now. The fear that had once chained me to the background was gone. Each time I walked through the living room or stepped into the kitchen, I felt Marina's eyes burning into me, but I did not flinch. My lawyer's documents were safe, the recording secure. I had leverage she could not erase. A week later, Antonio called. His voice was calm but serious. The papers are ready to file. Once you sign, the sale of the house will begin. They'll have 30 days to vacate, no exceptions. I set the phone down and breathed deeply. The moment was real now. The house I had lived in for decades, the walls that had held laughter and pain, would no longer be mine. It was bittersweet, but it was also liberation. That evening, I gathered the courage to speak with Daniel. He was sitting at the dining table with his head in his hands. Marina was out, her absence a rare gift. Daniel, I said quietly. He lifted his head, his eyes bloodshot. Mom, I don't know what to do. She's furious. She says you're destroying us. And maybe she's right. I sat across from him, folding my hands on the table. She's wrong. I didn't destroy this family. Her greed did. Your silence did. His lips trembled, but he said nothing. You are still my son, I continued. I carried you, raised you, worked my fingers raw to make sure you had a chance at life. And this is how it came back to me. I can forgive you, Daniel, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You will have to face them." His voice cracked. "What's going to happen to us when the house is sold? You'll have to find another place to live. Marina will have to face the reality that comfort doesn't come free. You will both learn what it means to stand on your own feet." He lowered his gaze again, tears dripping onto the table. For a moment, I saw not a grown man but the little boy who once cried after scraping his knee. My heart ached, but I held steady. When Marina returned and heard what I had said, the fury in her eyes could have lit the walls on fire. "You heartless witch," she spat. "You'll put your own son and grandson out on the street?" I met her glare. "Ethan will always have a place with me. You will not." The days that followed moved quickly. The real estate agent arrived, walking through each room with a polite smile and a clipboard. Marina hovered behind him, muttering under her breath about unfairness, about betrayal. When he left, she cornered me in the hallway. "You're making a mistake. No one will forgive you for this." I looked her straight in the eye. "I don't need their forgiveness. I need my freedom." Word spread fast in the neighborhood. Some whispered that I was finally standing up for myself. Others clucked their tongues at the scandal. I heard fragments of conversations at the grocery store, at church, even outside on the sidewalk. It didn't matter. The truth was out, and I was no longer ashamed. Marina began packing her things earlier than expected, but not out of acceptance. She made calls, loud ones, to her mother, to friends, painting herself as the victim. I ignored them. The law was on my side, and her words were nothing but smoke. Daniel tried once to convince me to stop the sale. "Mom, can't you at least let us rent the house? Keep it in the family?" I shook my head. "This house carries too much poison now. I need a clean start, Daniel. And so do you." The look on his face told me he finally understood. He said nothing more. 2 weeks later, Antonio met me at his office to finalize the transfer of my inheritance from Rachel. He slid the papers across the desk. "With the condos and savings, you will be more than secure. The sale of the house will add to that. You'll have choices most people your age can only dream of." I signed with a steady hand. My sister's handwriting still echoed in my mind from her letter. "Live, Estelle. Really live." When I left the office, the air felt lighter. The chains Marina had tried to lock around me had broken. The final blow came the night before the 30 days expired. Marina screamed at Daniel for hours, accusing him of weakness, of failing to protect her, of siding with me. Her voice carried through the walls like the screech of a blade. Ethan hid in my room, his small body curled against me as he tried to block out the noise. The next morning, she was gone. She had taken her clothes, her jewelry, and little else. Daniel stood in the kitchen with red eyes, holding a note she had left behind. "She says she's going to her mother's. She doesn't know if she's coming back." He looked lost, like a man watching his life collapse in slow motion. Ethan tugged at his sleeve, but he barely reacted. I placed my hand on Ethan's shoulder and spoke firmly. "You still have family. You still have me." Daniel turned away, unable to meet my eyes. That week, the sale of the house went through. The papers were signed, the agent shook my hand, and the weight that had pressed on me for years finally lifted. The house was no longer mine, but the burden it carried was gone too. Marina's threats, Daniel's silence, the humiliation I had endured, it all shifted into the past. What lay ahead was mine to shape. When I walked out of that house for the last time, Ethan by my side, I did not look back. The first morning in my new place felt like breathing after years of holding my lungs tight. The condo Rachel had left me was small but bright, sunlight spilling across the wooden floor through wide windows. I made coffee in a pot that was mine alone and sat at a table where every chair felt welcoming. There was no need to lower my voice, no eyes waiting to belittle me. It was quiet, and the quiet was kind. Ethan had spent the night on the couch, his small frame wrapped in a blanket, his breathing steady. When he woke, he looked around in wonder. "Grandma, it feels different here," he said softly. "It is different," I told him. "Here you can laugh as loud as you want. Here we can plant tomatoes on the balcony if we like. No one can tell us not to." His grin was enough to make the years of pain ease just a little. Over the next weeks, we began to build routines of our own. I walked him to school, cooked dinners he helped stir, and watched as his shoulders slowly loosened from the tension he had carried. He still asked about his mother, his voice hesitant, and I told him gently that love does not disappear even when people make mistakes. Daniel visited for the first time one quiet Sunday afternoon. He stood in the doorway, awkward, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. His eyes were swollen, and I knew sleep had been rare for him. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." I let him in. He sat at the table across from me, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. "You were right," he said. "I let her poison everything. I thought staying quiet would keep the peace, but it only broke us more. Marina is gone, maybe for good. And Ethan, he deserves better than the man I've been." His voice cracked, and he looked down at his hands. For a long moment, I simply watched him. The anger I had carried for so long wanted to flare, but another part of me, the part that remembered the boy he once was, softened. "I cannot erase what you allowed," I said, "but I can choose what happens now. If you are willing to change, if you are willing to stand for what is right, then there is still a place for you in my life. Not as the son who turned his head away, but as the man who chooses to make things right." He nodded quickly, relief washing over his face. "I'll try, Mom, I promise." Ethan came running into the room then, his laughter breaking the heavy air. He threw himself into Daniel's arms, and for the first time in a long time, I saw genuine warmth between them. It did not erase the past, but it was a beginning. The legal matters settled soon after, the house sold, the funds transferred. Antonio called to confirm that every document was in order, that Marina had no claim left to make. Justice had been delivered not by loud fights, but by careful proof and steady resolve. I used part of the money to start something small but meaningful. With Harold's encouragement, I invested in the community garden project on my land outside town. The acres that Marina had once dreamed of selling became rows of soil tilled by neighbors, a place where children learned to grow vegetables and older folks found purpose in tending plants. Each Saturday, I walked among them, the scent of earth and blossoms in the air, and felt pride return to my bones. Sometimes I wondered about Marina. Rumors drifted that she was living with her mother, bitter and restless. I did not rejoice in her downfall. Instead, I hoped one day she might face herself with honesty and find a way to change. Anger had nearly destroyed her, but forgiveness was the only thing that could free her. Daniel began coming more often, helping in the garden, fixing shelves in my condo, even cooking a meal or two with Ethan. We were not healed completely, but we were no longer broken beyond repair. Slowly, piece by piece, we were finding our way back. One evening as the sun set, Ethan tugged my hand. "Grandma, are we safe now?" I bent down to meet his eyes. "Yes, my love, we are safe, and we are free." The words felt true, in a way I had not known for years. Justice had been done, not through cruelty, but through truth. And forgiveness, though hard, had begun to mend the cracks left behind. I sat that night on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker. The world outside was vast, but inside me, peace had finally taken root. The scars of humiliation were still there, but so was the strength to rise beyond them. I had fought, I had endured, and I had reclaimed my dignity. More than that, I had found hope again. This was not just an ending, it was a beginning. What did you think of Estelle's journey? Have you ever witnessed how greed or silence can break a family, and how courage and forgiveness can put the pieces back together? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know which part of this story touched you most. If you'd like to hear more stories of strength, justice, and healing, make sure to subscribe and join me next time. Your support keeps these stories alive, and your voice helps shape the ones to come.